Hello and welcome to Gypsies Landing podcast. I'm Brittany and I'm so happy you are here. If you were with me last week, thank you for returning. So many of you had mentioned ways that my first podcast had inspired you to do something good for yourself. I heard of examples as starting their own podcast, investing into a pair of hiking boots, and getting a journal to start doing some journaling prompts. And to me, that means the first podcast was successful enough. And that is a good feeling to feel. I will admit that coming back for the second podcast was a little harder, surprisingly. I think it's because the ball is now rolling and a standard is set and it's vulnerable. It's hard to not set expectations of yourself. I know for me, I struggle with perfectionism, like I also mentioned in last week's episode. And so my mantra is to continually remind myself that I am good enough, that I am exactly where I need to be, that being a student is a part of the journey. When we show up and try something new, and if I keep showing up and I keep doing the next right thing, I keep investing in myself and believing in myself, I will end up exactly where I want to be. And honestly, just showing up and being here is a dream come true because, like I said, I had thought of this idea on and off for 5 years. So this week's topic will be about spiritual awakenings. Last week, I had mentioned that I had experienced a spiritual awakening on a walk, and I saw and felt myself finally doing this and starting my first podcast. So, what does spiritual awakening mean to me? To me, it means getting a new understanding, a new download, and a perspective shift of myself and my life in a new way that I had never known or felt before. And I've experienced many of these throughout my life. I'm sure in more ways than I can even recall, but I do know when they started coming more into perspective and I looked for them and became aware of them. I think that was because it was taught to me and it was mentioned to me. It was a new concept. We can't look for something that we're unfamiliar with and that we don't know exists. I believe that spiritual awakenings come from your higher power, God, the universe, and it awakens you and brings you to a higher version of yourself that you are meant to become. Because once we have these spiritual awakenings, it's hard to go back. It's hard to unlearn what we have now learned. In these moments of spiritual awakenings, a new you is born, and now your old self is gone. To get a spiritual awakening, I've realized that I have to be in a certain place to receive it. I have to fully accept myself and my life exactly where it's at. I have to surrender to anything that I can't control or something I wouldn't normally prefer. I have to surrender to it and allow it to be. And I also have to be at peace with where I am, with myself and my life. As I said, no matter the circumstances, to accept something, that doesn't mean we have to like it. It doesn't mean that we are in full joy or we have everything we've ever wanted. If anything, having to accept something is intentionally allowing and embracing our life to be and unfold exactly as it should. I know it's profound and interesting to think that in order to change, you have to allow yourself to be exactly as you are. It reminds me of this saying that what you resist persists. Usually when life is not going the way we want or a way we would prefer or envision for ourselves, we want to fight it, we want to deny it, resist, and control it. But life is like a river, and you have to allow it to flow. Don't fight against the current, because that's where it gets exhausting and we feel defeated because we're trying to fight our circumstances. I always like to think of that quote, that nothing in God's world happens by mistake. And this allows me to have more trust with where I am in life, wherever that is. So before I had this spiritual awakening, I went through all the things too. I was depressed, I was discouraged, I felt defeated, I felt hopeless and helpless. And the reason being because I thought my life was on a track headed in a certain direction. And it was a track I thought I'd always wanted. And then to realize that that track was not going to work and it was not meant for me. So I had to regroup and I had to go off course in a completely different direction. And that felt so defeating and discouraging because I was so invested and I tried so hard to have my life go in this certain way just for it to not end up the way I wanted it to. And when life doesn't fit our expectations, our standards, and our desires, it is so hard not to get resentful and in self-pity. We always think of grief as a thing that happens when someone we love dies. We don't talk about the grief that you experience when you don't get what you wanted out of life, especially in the time frames that we develop for ourselves, which I've been trying to remind myself that in God's eye, there is no timeline. Time was a human invention for us to have some kind of concept of what goes on in life, a structure that we developed, not what God created. To me, I believe that God sees our life as energy. It is a flow of energy. And depending where we are in our energy in certain areas of life, that's when God closes doors and opens doors, because he can sense when we're ready based on where we are operating from. I decided to process my grief, that my life didn't continue to go in that direction. And I allowed myself to just be with that grief. Yes, I would go out and socialize and I would try to connect, but it all felt so numbing because I was just not okay where I was at. But I still kept showing up and I still kept doing the next right thing, which I'm grateful for that I didn't give up, because when you do start to come around, you're going to be grateful and thankful to yourself that you carried on that momentum, because it's a lot harder to start back up if you completely check out. So I still went through the things because I knew what I was supposed to do and that I should be doing, so I did them anyways. But honestly, the only time I felt any amount of happiness in that season was sitting at home on my couch, binge watching Game of Thrones. Yes, that is correct. I did not tap into the season until 2024. I know, I'm a little bit behind track, but that's the way I like to do things. I'm not the kind of person that likes to tap into fads or what's popular. I like to wait until they blow over. And the great thing about that is I got to binge it all within weeks. Maybe that's toxic, but it felt really damn good. So anyways, ironically, what pulled me out of this state was a really dear friend of mine passed away. Unexpectedly. So I threw myself into service to the people that loved him and were very close to him, his closest family and friends. And I wanted to be connected and with them because I wanted to feel closer to him. And so, although it was a very sad and hard time, ironically, it brought life back into me. It was an honor that I was asked to be a part of his funeral. So talking about sort of like spiritual awakenings and seeds that were planted as I was in college in 2022, and I was in a life development class, and the professor asked us to find somebody in their 70s to interview about their life story. And we had a series of questions to ask from different phases throughout our life. So I chose this dear friend of mine who was in his 70s at the time. And I took him out to lunch at a buffet. And I sat there and I asked him these questions. And I learned so much more about him than I ever would have known if I wouldn't have got that assignment. It was a beautiful memory that I will never forget. So, the professor asked us to keep those assignments, or suggested, because he said a lot of people had used those assignments in those individuals' eulogies. So fast forward 2 years, I kept the assignment, my friend passed away, and I had that interview. So I informed his family of this, and of course they were thrilled and so happy to hear that I still had this assignment, that it had happened, and they asked me to share the questions and the answers with them and at his funeral with everybody else. And what an honor that was to do. He was such a good man. And his funeral showed that it matters how you live your life, because his funeral was standing room only. He showed up for everyone, everywhere, all of the time. And I want to live my life leading from my heart in that way, because it matters. And the lives we impact, whether it's 1, 3, 1,000, whatever the case, it's good enough. It reminds me of what they say, that Jesus will leave the herd to go after the one. And we are all the one when we are struggling. So, this sad, heartbreaking event brought life back into me. It got me out of my self-pity, and it made me want to make the most of my life again. So instead of feeling defeated that my life didn't go the way it planned, I wanted to make it all that it was now. Because that's the thing, we always want to say the grass is greener over there on your side, what you have, what you are doing. And it is hard in this day of social media. There are billions of messages of what people are doing with their life all of the time. And it's human nature to compare. We can develop the tools to catch it and to reframe it and to let it go and not detach to it and not let it bring us down, or motivation mirrors into what we want for ourselves. But it is the reality of the day we are in. So as I decided to fully embrace where I was in life, not only just accept it and surrender to it, but to come to peace with it, like I'd mentioned before. If anything, love it and find value and opportunity in it. And in that peace and that presence on that walk, enjoying the sunshine on my skin, the birds chirping in the trees, and just walking beautifully in that moment, it hit me. That is where I want to go with my life. That is what I want to do. That is my dream, my purpose. And so that is where the spiritual awakening hit. It is always darkest before the dawn. It's so true. We hear these things all the time, and then it's so beautiful when we find ourselves in them. This wasn't the first time my life hadn't gone as planned. There were many different things I tried before, and it just all felt like they led up to this moment. There's times in life where we feel like we are exactly where we are supposed to be, and that everything that happened along the way was worth it. And that is a beautiful place to be. And I really hope that you all have experienced that at some point, or you're in that as well, or you're about to have a breakthrough, because it is available to us all if we want it, if we seek it, if we do the work to prepare for it. I always see my higher power like a father, and that I'm the child, like a parent would do with a child. Are you going to reward your child for bad behavior? Are you going to reward your child when they're not listening to you? As a parent, you want the closeness from your child. You want the respect. And that's where you tend to reward good behavior. I think higher power gave us free will so we could do our own thing. But just because we have freedom doesn't mean that they don't come with consequences. So what are you doing in your life? Are you seeking for that higher connection in that higher place within yourself and within the universe? Or are you isolating and shutting down and not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel? There's been many times I would just have to tell myself that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even though I didn't see it yet, and I had to keep pushing forward. All good things come from all of the chapters we've experienced before in our life. All of mine have led up to really me doing what I'm doing right now. And I'll give you some examples. In school, I got in trouble a lot for talking. And then after high school, I thought about becoming a broadcast journalist. Instead, I went into modeling and acting, and then I went into marketing and promotions at events, and then I got into working in the mental health field after I finished my college degree, and I wanted to live my life more from my heart. And now I'm here on this podcast with you, hoping to share my experience, strength, hope, and perspectives to help you through whatever you are going through. And I want you to feel like I'm your friend, because I am. We don't ever have to go through the darkness alone, and a pain shared is a pain cut in half. There are tons of people and resources out there that are here to help you. When we go through the journey of life, we find out what works for us and what doesn't, what we like and what we don't like, who we are and who we are not. We lean into the things that make us feel good, fulfill us in some way, make us feel better about ourselves. And we lean away from the things that don't work, the things that cause harm or make us not feel good. Trust in your intuition. Trust in what feels right and what doesn't. After I had this reroute in my life, certain people thought it would be best for me to go back to college. Well, I've been to college and I have a degree. I didn't really want to get more. Some people thought about me getting, a full-time job. Well, I didn't want to because I wanted to sit here and create with you. So yes, I work. It's not consistent or full-time, but to me, it's quality out of life, not quantity. And I would rather be doing what I want to do than what I'm told to do or what people think I should do. Because it's not their life, it's mine. And I felt qualified enough and I felt ready that I can offer everything I already have right here, right now. Why does society tell us so much that we have to do something or become something to get somewhere? Is that always true? It's true to an extent, but I do believe in life experiences as well. I love listening to podcasts. I love reading books. It's like, do I really have to continue to go more and more into debt for more certificates or milestones? Sometimes we do. Sometimes what we go into requires those things. But is the journey right for you? That's what matters most. And your life can look any way you want it to look. This life is abundant and it's beautiful. And there are billions of doors around every corner. Your door exists, whatever that is your heart desires. And I'm grateful I honored where I'm at and developed my life how I wanted and how I see as fit. And I feel better about myself for it. I don't want to conform. I've spent too many years unconforming. And it's a beautiful feeling to be your authentic, beautiful you. Life can either be a playground or a prison. In the prison, you do what you think or that you are told to do or supposed to. Anytime you do something you feel like you're supposed to do, a dream dies. Remember that. In the playground, there's freedom. You take chances. Anything is possible. You try new things. You explore. You have fun. You live. I hope you live a life of things you want to do, things that matter. In these spaces where you are in joy and love, that is when you are closest to your highest self, your highest vibration. And that's where you get these spiritual awakenings. You are a human being, not a human doing. God created us to love ourselves and love our life. He wants us to be happy. This life was a gift. It was meant to be embraced, enjoyed, and explored. I love that kind of funny way of thinking about it, but very true, about all the sperm that are released when we are created. We were the ones that won the race, right? It could have been millions of different people created. It's insane to think about how much of a miracle it was that we were even here. Right before the breakthrough of this spiritual awakening, it can feel like suffering. That's the period of preparation. That's where we're challenged and uncomfortable, and it can hurt. And that's where many people give up. They go back to maybe something that was comfortable, something that didn't even really make them happy. But the beast that's familiar can always feel better than what we don't know, because that's scary, taking a chance on ourselves and on life. But if you have faith and you trust and you love, and especially a higher power or an energy of the universe or a God that will love you and catch you and direct you to where you need to go in the time you are supposed to, you look for those miracles and you will find it. I promise you. I've heard this story a couple times recently about when buffalo see a storm, they run towards the storm. They run through it to get on the other side. That's a beautiful way of thinking about it. in all the ways we develop through that storm that make us into the most beautiful versions of ourselves. And that is the truth. It's like when they say diamonds are created from being crushed, or a seed has to go through thick, dark soil to come out on the other end and become a flower. The only way out is through. And everything that you ever wanted or dreamed of is on the other side of that struggle, I promise you. You have to become the version of yourself that is ready to listen, to receive, and to move, to experience that spiritual awakening. It takes action. It takes willingness. We have to unbecome everything that we no longer are to become everything that we need to be. The gypsy chooses the playground. In this space, the gypsy is free, unattached, unapologetic, not worried of the opinions of others, and is full in their true self. I'm assuming that if you are here and you are still listening and you are part of this community, you want to be free like the gypsy. And this is where we land all together on this beautiful, magical platform. I'm going to end with some questions. How did all of that make you feel? What are you thinking? Do you believe in yourself? Is your life exactly how you want it? Are you living in everything you envisioned for yourself? I know for me, I'm in the middle of creating. I'm so grateful and I'm so happy with everything that is, and I look forward to everything that is to come. I'm going to say some affirmations and feel free to repeat them with me. I believe in myself. I trust in the universe. I choose love. I am protected. I am deserving of all the things I want, and the universe wants to give me all of that. I'm going to say this prayer. Feel free to invite your higher power, your God, your Father Fire, your Mother Earth. Higher power, thank you so much for bringing this individual onto this podcast with me. I believe that there is something in this podcast that you wanted this person to receive, and I pray that they receive that. I pray that they were able to open their heart and they were able to connect with themselves. And I pray that they take that love and that connection and they go take it to somebody in this world. Rather it's a loved one, a pet, or a stranger. I pray that they look for somebody that can really use it, because we all deserve love. We are loved. And I love all of you. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode. I was not expecting to get that vulnerable. I was not expecting to cry with you, but crying is beautiful. It is our purest form of vulnerability and love, and that is the bridge to connection that we were created for. And that is how we experience intimacy. Intimacy is into you, I see. Thank you so much. I have opened up fan mail on my Buzzsprout account, so please feel free to reach out to me. If you are connected to me on social media, please feel free to reach out there. I would love to hear how this podcast resonated with you. Also, please feel free to give suggestions on what you would like to hear on future podcast topics. And I will see you next week as we cover a brand new episode and a brand new topic. Until then, live well and be happy.